Welcome viewers and listeners to another episode of Blighty Talks Bricks. If you've been following the podcast, you'll know that I've mentioned we have a theme here, and the theme continues today because my guest today is another one who is just an amazing human being. I've known this lady, I'm going to say over 30 years, it's probably pushing closer to 40, but she was very young when I met her. When I met her, she was a sales manager at Crest. She was also the first female managing director for Lang Homes, which ended up being part of Wimpy. I would describe this lady as having an amazing passion for the industry and a fantastic work ethic. So without further ado, let me just introduce my guest today, Sarah Pascoe. Welcome to Blighty Talks Bricks.
Thank you, Blighty. What a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's lovely to see you. How are you?
I'm all right. It's been a tough year, but I'm all right.
I know some of the stuff there, and we'll touch on that in a moment. And I know it's been a tough year. And what I like to do for my guests is I always try to have something that is a way of me of showing a bit of respect, but also to make them feel at ease. I'm not sure that necessarily this is going to make you feel at ease, but I don't know if you people can see on my lapel here, I've got the prostate cancer badge, and I just want to give you my sympathies because I know last year you lost your dad to prostate cancer.
I did.
We'll come back to that because I know it's a conversation we're going to have, but remembering when I was thinking back last night about when I first met you, it was one of the most bizarre situations I think I've ever met somebody on. I was the sales manager for Legal and General Estate Agencies. You was the sales manager at Crest. I went to an opening on the Saturday. I'd missed you. I hadn't seen you in the build-up to that. It's where we first met Liz Robinson.
It was.
So, yeah. And I got on site and I said to the site foreman, I've seen Sarah's car here. Where is she? And he said, she's driving a lorry. And I said, what do you mean she's driving a lorry? He said, that lorry there with the scouts on.
So I had this mad idea. We had no sales at Cheshunt.
That was down to the agent, was it?
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
But it was at a time where the market was really, really tough and getting anyone to site was difficult. So I had this mad idea that we'd give away a holiday, but how was I going to get people to site? So it was a trip to New York. So I arranged for a lorry with a band on, with my Venture Scouts dressed up, literally handing out leaflets in the town to get them to come to site to try and generate sales.
I remember you getting out of the lorry and I just thinking, wow, this is what you call enthusiasm for your job. Yeah. And you've always been the same.
Well, I think the enthusiasm went too far when I had to dress up as the Statue of Liberty to have the prize back.
Did you do that? I don't remember that.
I've still got a photograph somewhere going through my dad's scrapbooks. I think he kept every, article that I ever had in the industry. And there's a picture of me as the Statue of Liberty.
It was interesting. I mean, I've dealt with lots of sales directors over the years. Some of them I'll forget straight away. But you were fantastic. And I know you went on to become an MD, not only for Lang, but also for Taylor Wimpey. But there certainly was something about the sales and the sales staff and the sales managers and sales directors of Crest at that time. I think they were the leaders, in my eyes, in terms of training and the way the job should be done.
We had a great mentor in Nigel Davis. He was phenomenal in the training sense. I mean, I only went for lunch with him recently, actually.
Oh, right, okay, we'll send him my love.
I will, because he got diagnosed with prostate cancer and wasn't given very long, and he's still going. I think that was to get more free lunches, actually. But he had this whole system sorted out on how he was going to train people at Crest, and he had to go through a really rigorous session, three-day training courses, and if you didn't make it, you didn't get kept. So you had to really push yourself.
Because do you have something like a gold, silver and bronze?
We did, yeah. And I used that whole training program when I took it to Azerbaijan. So I was employed by the First Lady to be the sales director, and they'd never sold property because it was ex-Russian. So it was the first time of property sales, and
So
I
you've
had to train their
jumped. You've
staff.
jumped.
I'm sorry.
You've jumped. I mean, I want to bring you back a little bit here. As I said, we're going to be here a long time. But that training program, I'm amazed it hasn't actually been copied. I don't think the industry does enough training with sales staff. I genuinely don't.
On the basics of...
Just the basic fundamentals. I also don't. I think there's a lot of sales directors that are not worthy.
I can't comment on those, obviously, but I do think that we've missed the point on training, and that is 2 ears for one reason and listening, and actually identifying what people really want, and then repeating that back to them that you've got that, and you can help them move into their dream home. You can help facilitate everything. 'Cause it's scary moving, isn't it?
Well, I think I read years ago it's one of the most stressful things that you will do as an adult.
Yeah, along with divorce, death, and cancer probably now.
Right, well, yeah, okay. This is a good show, isn't it?
I
We're
know,
doing well here,
great
aren't we?
show, happy show.
But no, it is, and you're
Yeah.
right. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? We take apprentices on. We take, everyone's got to be sort of qualified. Yet the amount of people that I know, house builders use agencies, not agents, agencies.
Yeah.
That
And they're not
last
qualified.
port of call, you've got somebody there that doesn't know anything about the site. Surely we'd be better to close the site, put a sign up, than to actually put someone there that, bless them, they don't know. But the amount of times that still goes on today.
It does. And what's more scary is it's changed so completely selling. So when I first started selling on site, somebody would come in, you'd do all your sales bit, and then you'd literally take £500 cash off them.
Yep.
You'd have to bank it on a Monday morning. Now the checks and the discipline that you've got to have behind that is so much higher in terms of who they are, proving who they are, what they've got, where they're going, how they're going to move and everything else. It's 2 hours to do a reservation now. Because we've also got to be transparent in what we're giving the customer in everything that we do, from the street light outside a bedroom window to, when the school's going to be built and everything else. It has changed a lot. You can't afford agency anymore.
No, you can't. And also I think house builders have got to look at being open 7 days a week doesn't necessarily work either.
No.
We've really got to look at what we do. That's one of the challenges the industry got. I don't think we get a fair rap from the public, but that's one of the areas that we really do need to be looking at. And
well, I think the whole thing's changed with the pandemic. Appointments, online Zoom, there's so much more opportunity to tailor ourselves to what customers need and how they want to respond. Nowadays, I don't know about you, but with my grandson, if I can't do something, he tells me to look on YouTube.
Oh,
I only discovered YouTube watching you the other day in Blighty Bricks.
Well, listen, it's I've just got used to the 2-speed kettle I've got at home. So the younger generation in the office, they call me dinosaur.
Yeah.
Some of the things you can do. Somebody said, "Oh, you got a shortcut there."
What's one of those?
Shortcut. I didn't even know. No, I'm not technical.
Yeah.
And it's definitely a different world we're in, working on site. But the fundamentals are still the same.
Yes.
Show units.
Yeah.
That word gets lost so much. I went to a development yesterday, I won't mention any names, and wow, show house, really? Wow. We could take a lesson from the car industry for sure.
I think we can from technology, definitely, in terms of how you could theme your home. And everybody, if you think... Do you remember when we used to have to buy tin, as they called it, instead of cloud for the 26th of December? Otherwise your website fell over because everybody searched it. And I think that we're just not geared up to be as quick to respond to what customers want as we could be.
Well, I think also lots of companies have been gobbled up, put together. And I think that reporting situation goes further up the line. Back in your day, would have been your boss, Steve Stone, at the time?
Yeah.
You got hold of Stoney straight away.
Yeah.
And that was the same for all of them, the reporting system. It's interesting, and we should be better in communicating, but I think the worst thing we've got is email.
It is, because it's not...
People hide behind it.
Well, or don't answer the phone, and then the customer gets more upset because you're not actually responding properly. I think email warrior, it's like texting, it's like anything. If you don't speak to somebody face to face or on the phone, you lose all the message. What did we get taught selling? 70% of communication is body language,
Oh.
and yet we ignore it completely. And that's the basic selling technique, isn't it?
I think we've created a phobia that we don't want to talk.
Yeah.
You know, I have a rule in the office, never email when a telephone call will do.
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes when people say to me, I'll say, how have we dealt with that? Oh, well, I've sent an email. What does that mean? But it's down to us, you know, and also I think we're in a woke world. I'm not woke. People are scared to talk.
But, so my nephew's trying to buy an apartment at the moment.
Well, I've got some sites if he wants to come and give me a call.
Has he? Southampton?
No,
back to
but
Mr.
well, maybe
Truscott
I'll get him a new Atlas. I mean,
All
maybe he should move somewhere up in Hertfordshire, or actually, I'll get him to Aldershot.
Can you?
But yeah,
No, so he's desperately trying to buy this apartment, and I'm like, "What have you done?" And he said, "I've emailed, and I'm now ringing his agent every day." And I go, "Hello, hello, Chris, it's Sarah again. I told you I'd ring you daily until you gave me the answers I needed." And that's where people don't follow that through. You know, he's desperate to move, but his answer is to email.
you're absolutely right. One of the things I've just picked up there, what you've said to me is, where did you get this energy and this inspiration and this ambition? I mean, how did you get into the industry, first of all?
Well, it is quite well known, but I'm a daddy's girl. So even when I was like 8 or 9, I got my first pay pack working with my dad.
Right.
I used to climb in the back of his car and hide, so when he got to work I was already there because I was desperate to be around my dad. So I started off as a management trainee at Lovell Homes, which is slightly different. Lovells are still Lovells, but it's switched from private housing to more housing association. And I just literally, wherever my dad was, I was happy being. I just adored him.
So you got a work ethic from that.
Totally.
And what did your dad do?
So he started off as a brickie.
Right.
He then went into be a surveyor, and then he went and did exams at night school and became finance director, and ended up as group finance director at Lovells.
Did he really?
So it never occurred to me you couldn't get promotion regardless of what you'd done or who you were.
Well, and again, it's another thing that, you know, I mentioned about this industry. It's amazing in giving people an opportunity. I mean,
Yeah.
I left school with absolutely nothing.
I didn't have much more than you, Blighty.
And look what you've achieved.
Yeah,
And also, I mean, you know, I'm going to bring it up at some point, but female as well.
yeah.
Just touching on the female bit, did you find that you had objections to your career path being a female?
Oh, my first boss, Paul Wiltshire, sadly no longer with us, but he was Group MD when my dad was Group Finance Director. He actually said to me, I've still got it, it's my first appraisal, said that I was over-enthusiastic and over-ambitious and need to calm down a bit. And the first time
You still haven't done that, by
it
the way,
didn't
Sarah.
happen, no. And I got promoted to MD, and I can remember ringing him. I might have had 1 or 2 vodkas by then, and shouting up your bum, got it. Because I was just chuffed to bits, and he was chuffed to bits for me as well. But I don't think, when I met other graduates, because I was a management trainee, and the graduates came along and they got degrees, so they were technically better than you. None of them worked the hours that I worked or would do anything. I didn't care what it was, I'd do it. So even when I was doing my management training program, I still worked on site at weekends to do cover for holidays. So I'd do 7 days a week and think nothing of it, because I just soaked it all up. There's so much to learn. Even now, every day is a new opportunity, isn't it?
Oh, it's an industry that, you know, I got my son to come into the business because one of the things, I mean, I literally had to beg him to come in. I think he probably regrets it now. But I said to him, it's an industry that's full of amazing people. Yeah. And every day, within reason, is different.
Oh, it is. There is, you know, you talk to some of my friends, they don't really get what you do because one's an optician, she's married to a long-distance lorry driver. I mean, I start talking and that you can see them switch off sometimes, but they just don't get how exciting it is, what we do.
So you described you exactly in the beginning. You haven't changed in all that time, and you know, I always say about people in my life that whenever I leave you, I've got more energy. You know, you bring energy into the room.
Thank you.
And that's a lovely thing to leave behind. But how did you get from Lovell to Crest?
So I had an interview with Nigel Davis. So we must have been about early 90s. You know, just when we had that double taxation go away and
Yeah,
everything
Maris,
else.
wasn't it?
Sorry?
I think it was called
It
Maris.
was Maris. The Maris disappeared.
People are going, what's Maris?
I know. And lots of people suddenly bought houses together, didn't they?
They didn't, yeah. Got
And
together
they
and they should never have been together.
They shouldn't. That was quite entertaining. And Nigel interviewed me, and then they had a freeze on jobs. So, because the market suddenly stopped.
Yep.
So I stayed at Lovells, and I'd have never have left Lovells if there'd have been more opportunities, but they were struggling as well. And Nigel rang me for a month, every month, for 9 months, until I was free and he could employ me.
Really?
And so his enthusiasm to employ me, you know, we talk about why people go that extra mile. It's who you work for and how they make you feel, isn't it?
I think so. I mean, I've had, you know, 5 amazing mentors.
Yep.
All of them are still around, fortunately. And you're right. They just give you, I don't know what it is, just when you feel you don't have that extra yard in you, you find it.
Yeah, you do. So I was really lucky. He made me feel very, very wanted. And then the sales director left, Ken left, and went to
Ken
Barrett.
Lee.
Ken Lee, the Silver Fox.
See, I'm not losing my mind.
Silver
Yeah,
Fox.
Silver Fox, yeah.
So Ken left, and I was running the sales department. Stephen, after 6 months, I said to Stephen Stone, sack me or promote me. But
He sacked you.
yeah, he did, and I had to go
Be
somewhere
careful
else.
what you ask for. There's a lesson there.
Yeah, there is. And I got promoted in the May to sales director. So it was 29:30.
And that was going to Lang?
No, that was sales director at Crest.
Oh, that was Crest. He did promote
Yeah,
you then. Right, okay.
He did. It's just you pulling my leg.
Right, okay. Well,
And
I was
then-
just trying, you know.
So I'm still mates with Milne. So Graham Milne and I, one was
Graham
land.
Milne, yeah, that's right.
And I was sales director. And we would put on this training programme for the opportunity to be MDs. Well, Milne was put on it, and I was just completely ignored. And I can remember getting a phone call about a year later from the HR director saying, we really must do something. It was Greg, and I said, too late, I'm going to Lang. Because Stuart Wallace had headhunted me.
Stuart Wallace. So where did you go to? Lang at Boreham Wood?
Yes, as
Right.
his sales
And that's
director.
when we met Lee Bishop.
It is,
I texted him yesterday. So you started your journey with Lang.
yes. So Stuart and Steve Lidgate, he was quite visionary, and we had a training course. I think there was 14 of us on it to see who was the next MDs, get us ready. And that's really when I got to know Bish. And from that course was my first promotion to MD at Lang, Boreham Wood.
Right, so it was at Boreham Wood you took over.
Yeah, so I took over from Stuart. He'd
And
gone to Bellway.
That's right. You went to Bellway. And then Lang got merged, bought, sold, whatever you want to call it.
Got
to
sold. George Wimpey.
George Wimpey. It was George
Yeah.
Wimpey then.
Yes, it was. And that was a huge shock. And I was a real pain in the butt then. I definitely had
What do you mean then?
Okay, I was a massive pain in the butt, in the sense I really had a snob issue at that time between Lang and George Wimpey, and that was quite ugly in some ways. So I was quite cantankerous.
You were right, mind you. The
Well-
product at that time, Lang was definitely 4 notches up to George Wimpey.
It was the customer service as well, I felt. So I had a big fallout with Mr. Truscott, one of your previous
Yes,
chats,
Peter, yep.
about sizes of houses and width of frontages and how many homes he could get on a site compared to a Lang site, and we had a huge debate. But I think whoever you work for, your personality, if you drive something hard enough, and especially as an MD, and drive a region hard enough, you can create that sense of worth, customer service, how you treat people, how you treat your staff, you know, what you do, that extra bit that you do, that extra bit of charity work that you do, exercise, things you do for the staff that maybe we'd never have thought of when I first started. You'd have been called a wimp for some of the things I do now.
Oh, listen, you know, I struggle a little bit with my emotional wellness, and my dad, bless him, I'm sure, and my mum, I'm not sure they'd be too enamoured that my mum would say, why are you taking your dirty washing in public?
Yeah.
For me to say I feel a bit down and a bit, that wouldn't have been,
No.
that wouldn't have been a well done, son. That would have been grow some.
Yeah.
You know, you're a man up, that kind of talk.
Yeah.
And it is a different world, and I think that's great. I do think it's great, and I struggle. So I'm applauding the fact that we can be a bit more open and a bit more honest the way we feel. But sometimes I think that can be taken too far as well. And I think the world we're in today, the trouble is, you see, when you give a bit, you've always got somebody that's going to take the piss.
But you can't do everything by the one person that ruins it for everyone else. So I can remember bringing in flexible working, which is probably about 9 years ago now, really before anybody else had done something.
Yeah.
Mainly for working mums, because I can imagine you were like this. You'd hide the shoe to make sure you didn't have to go to school that day. So mum's running around trying to find the shoes.
Go to where?
School. You know, that I know.
School. Oh, yeah.
Mum's running around trying to get the shoes, you know, get Johnny in the car because she's going to be late for work because it's 8:30 on the dot. And now she's late because the traffic's slightly later and everything else. And that level of anxiety that we've just put that person through to get to work is then half an hour wasted at work because you haven't made them feel comfortable about
when
what
they get there,
doing.
they're stressed. You know, listen, I can remember back in the day going into big offices and somebody always being in tears.
Yeah.
And that was anxiety, all the things that you said. And actually, once you got to the bottom of it, it was as basic as, you know,
Johnny hides his shoes every
absolutely.
morning. And that's so for me, it was about how do we get people to go that extra for me if I'm going that extra for them. So I said, this is what I want to do. You choose what flexible working looks like and come back and we'll talk about it. Directors were banned from being involved at all because at that point, I think they were all male and not one of the wives worked. So they had they had no wife panicking about getting to work the next day. They didn't have that history or understanding. And I said, you've got to monitor it. If somebody's taking the piss out of us by not doing the hours, you've got to sort it out yourselves or come and tell me.
But when you did that, and it in the industry, it would have been groundbreaking for sure. You know, the great thing, I'm lucky, is that I've worked with pretty much the A to Z of the house building industry as an agent. And that would have been groundbreaking. I think the problem we've got now is it's gone past what the companies want. It's their right. And that's not right.
It is crazy. So there's an element that you need that flexibility to be able to do. But
correct.
Some of it you've got to be on the ground. And I think two things. One is we've got to train our managers to manage a project and the time that project should take and what's that workload for that person to do. So if we've not got them in the office, seeing when they're in, what they're doing and everything else, how are we actually managing workload? Because I don't think we've been geared up to manage workload. We've been geared up to make sure they're in their office Monday to Friday, 8:30 till 5, and if they're in those hours, you assume that workload is being done. So I think we've got to re-educate and retrain ourselves into what does that look like. And, you know, when you set that plan to buy that site, you program the whole thing out to finish the site. So that's your time scale of when you want things to happen. And I think we've also got to give the opportunity when those people come back to work that there's value to them doing that journey. They're not just coming in to be seen. So what is happening that day? What are they going to get out of it? What are you going to get out of them? How do you set their targets and their goals and get the information both ways? So see it as slightly differently as them having to be in the office. What's the opportunity that when they come in, you get the best for both parties? And it's that mindset change again, isn't it? Don't get me wrong, I'd love everybody to be in every day because I don't like working from home. But that's because I live on my own already, so I've got to have somebody to talk to. But it's getting that excitement. So I did Love Your Workspace Day, and each department had a challenge to win a spot to improve, and they got given £200 each to improve that area. So the commercial team bought a pool table with their money off eBay and did the kitchen and cleared out all the rubbish and everything else and set up something completely different, and then set up a pool league table and people would play, and it all of a sudden there's different reasons and it's not just work, is it? But over that pool table they'll be chatting the way they used to chat when they were in the office before. Precisely. So it looks like, oh, what you're doing, that's a bit woke, but go and look at Google.
I don't think that's woke.
No.
I think that's constructive employment to make the environment better.
Yep.
When you actually get a situation, I won't name the company, come into the office when you want to.
Yeah.
What?
We can't run a business like that.
Wow. Come in when you want to. Wow. That don't make sense.
No. Well, Google doesn't operate like that. And they've got, groundbreaking when you go to their offices, which gave me loads of ideas, of these pop-up spaces where people go and chat. So it wasn't always in a formal meeting room necessarily the same way opposite each other, because some people can't cope with the eye contact. So it's just finding out who your people are, what inspires them. Is it football? Is it rugby? Is it golf? Is it yoga? New thing for me. What is it that motivates them, so that when you talk to them, also you have that conversation. On site, when you used to go on site, I don't know about you, I knew every subbies football team. So I knew the scores on a Monday morning.
Whether he was going to be in a good mood or a bad mood.
Well, that was from working with Peter Truscott, because if Southampton lost...
I wore his shirt the other week.
But it is, how well do you know your people? How do you get that extra 10% out of somebody?
Well, look, in the last 4 years, I've not heard anyone speak like that. All I've heard is grumbles about the environment we're in from certain companies who say, well, this is shocking, to others that, I'll come in when you want. Both of those paths are traumatic and will end in tears. This is why we need you in the industry.
Thank you.
It's not rocket science.
No.
It's common sense, but it's visionary. But you've mentioned the word visionary a few times. You were brought up with Nigel creating vision.
He did.
And this podcast is vision. I mean, I didn't know what a podcast was, I'll be perfectly honest.
On the weekend, I was on a yoga retreat at the weekend, and I said, anybody done podcasts? And I said, how do I find them? And they're laughing at me. Yeah. But I don't know about you. I think time is one of the things as well, in terms of, I love listening to the radio and so podcast isn't in there in that.
Well, I listened to the second episode of the Cherry Brothers from Countryside and Stone Bond today when I would, believe it or not, to go to the gym, in the gym this morning.
Yeah.
But it was the youngsters, the younger generation, probably get in trouble for saying youngsters, younger generation that said to me about podcasts. I actually thought they were new. I didn't know they'd been going for pretty much eons.
I know they've been going for some time because I listened to Chris Evans,
right.
And he always highlights podcasts, but I just never listened to them because I like to listen to him because he lives in Marlow where I live, and I find out more about what's going on in Marlow because he's told me. Right. Yeah.
So going back to your career, you was at Lang. You then went. What made you leave from Lang to go to your next? What was your next journey?
So when we got taken over by George Wimpey, I think the second or third year, I can't remember exactly, we were all called in and basically be made redundant or take a step down. Various jobs all changed all over the place for all of us. And the payment was huge. It made a huge dent in my mortgage. So I left.
Right.
And went to a private company. I did a couple of private companies, and that just was not my cup of tea at all. It was like I couldn't fit in.
You're a PLC.
I am.
Odd.
And there just wasn't enough workload almost. I didn't know what to do with myself in terms of what's the next thing. I don't know whether we just get through more or the discipline's there because there's more for you to go at through size. But I really struggled. And then my husband's business went down and we needed to pay the bank a lot of money. So I found myself a job in Azerbaijan.
Because it paid?
$15,000 a month. And I had to pay an interest bank of £8,000 a month.
Right. And it purely wasn't simply... And what was that experience like? I mean, it must have been... I mean, now you've done it. I mean, a great chapter in your book you're going to write one day. But
no.
Was it enjoyable?
No. It's ex-Russian, 95% Muslim, but you would have never have known that if you'd visited. But they didn't even have a postal system, so there was no birthday cards, postcards. The electric was quite fragile, so if the electric went down, some of my staff could have been out of electric for 5 days, not just
Really?
a few hours. One night I can remember watching this thunderstorm going off, and it was like the fireworks of electric, because it was coming off, coming on, coming off, coming on. They're desperate to be seen as European. I mean, you've seen them. They employed Tony Adams, didn't they, as their manager for a little while.
Yep.
They were desperate to win the European Song Contest, which they did the second year of trying. They've got the Formula One. And living in Baku and knowing it the way I do, God knows how they get those cars around the street in the old city, because they are really tight. So they really want to become part of Europe rather than being part of Russia and that side of it. So the Muslim side came out in that no man would take an order, if you like, or being asked to do something by a woman. So you weren't even allowed to go out on your own as a female. So if you wanted to go out, I had to ask my dad or my granddad or my boyfriend or my husband or my father-in-law to even go out shopping. You weren't allowed to go out on your own as a female. And if you did, you were considered a prostitute. So the first couple of times I went shopping on my own into Baku, I wondered why I was stared at so much.
Because you just actually just toddled off thinking, well,
there wasn't anyone else to go shopping with. So it was a really hard lesson to learn. I mean, my crew in Baku were fantastic. They really, really were. They embraced everything we tried to do. But I had to do everything by body language. So I set all their training up and using some of that old Crest training, the basics of what, who, when, why, how. And they were doing the conversations, but remember, they've never sold. You had the female-male thing that I didn't really understand at that point. So the guys would do one thing in the room and the ladies would do another, and they were always like almost bowing down to them if they wanted something. So I was struggling with this a little bit.
Unworkable, isn't it?
Yeah. And in the end, I decided to let them do it in their own language, whether that was Azeri or Russian, and I videoed it, and then Sabina, my sales manager, we were going to go through it and she'd translate and we'd see what they were doing. But I realised basic body language, if they were interested, they leaned in, and if they weren't, they leaned away, didn't they? Or
really?
Start looking somewhere else.
What'd you say?
Yeah. What was that? And the whole thing, Niet and DR, if they did a closed question, they only answered yes or no. If they did an open question, they spoke lots. So eventually, I never needed the video. We just did the whole training.
So how long was you there for?
Just over a year.
Right. Probably felt like 10.
Oh, it did. The last visit back, I actually said to my husband, I won't be doing this again. I won't be getting back on a plane. When I come home next time, that's it. So we met in Dubai once and played golf in Dubai rather than me coming home, because I couldn't face getting back on the plane again. It was too lonely. However good the crew were to me, it was still too lonely.
Yeah.
So.
And so when you came back, where did you go to then?
I was fortunate enough that between Mr. Bishop, Mr. Redfern and Mr. Truscott, I went back to Taylor Wimpey.
TW as it was.
Yeah. And I went back as a sales director.
And I know if I cut your hand, you bleed TW.
It has been said.
No, you do. Listen, I've seen it so many times, but I know that you do. And I know the reason, but the listeners won't. Why did the journey come to an end at TW?
So my dad hadn't been well for some time, and I was really beginning to struggle with the travelling. And then he got seriously ill at the Easter. We thought we were going to lose him that week. And I was literally going to my mum's at 6 o'clock in the morning, helping my mum with my dad, driving to Southampton.
From Marlow?
From Marlow, driving to Southampton, doing my day job, and then driving back, going back to my mum and dad's, helping my mum with my dad, and going home, having something to eat, go to bed, get up, and do it all again.
You can't do that for too long.
No, but I didn't realise how exhausted I was from it till an opportunity came to work closer to home. And I was so focused on my dad, nothing else really seemed to enter my brain at the time, even though, to be fair to Taylor Wimpey, there were other opportunities, but I was so focused on that. I still had to do my job because my dad was quite old-fashioned. Time off wasn't, you had a holiday, but you didn't get time off from work. you worked. And he, you know, what's all this fuss about? Get on and do your job. So I was caught in that old-fashioned, how my dad saw me, if you like, and me wanting to be there for my mum and dad. And so I left TW and went to join Carla, but I wasn't as focused as I probably should have been with the grief once Dad went. So I'm not with Carla anymore.
And you mentioned grief, and you don't have to answer this question. Have you dealt with your grief?
I didn't really until September last year, and it just hit me like a tsunami. I'd been running around after my mum and everybody else, and hadn't really done anything for myself. And I actually found the message on my phone the other day. I messaged my old PA, Lucy, and I went, "Help, I'm in trouble." And
you reached out?
I reached out, and as usual, as PA, she told me what to do. In fact, you know, we talk about Mrs. Axford. She runs the entire company, doesn't she, sometimes?
Who Lady Wimpy?
Lady Wimpy, she does. So Lucy said, phone the doctors now. So I phoned the doctors now. And then she phoned me back and said, have you phoned the doctors? I said, yes, I phoned the doctors. And so I was signed off with grief, and I got counselling. I also went to church with my mum a little bit because although that's not necessarily what I would do on a regular basis, it helped my mum. So I thought it might help me understand her grief as well as my own. And we did quite a bit together, but most of it I slept, if I was honest.
Yeah.
I think that level of exhaustion.
As you and I touched on it the other day, that, you know, my emotional wellness, and a lot of people that talk to me about it mention tiredness. You know, some people say they find it really difficult to put one foot in front of the other.
Yeah. I struggle to motivate myself to do much, and that's not something I struggle with normally.
That's not you at all, is it?
So I wrote a list down of things that I needed to do every day. So I had to go for a walk every day, even if it was only literally round the block. I had to make myself food from scratch every day, and I had to read a chapter of a book just to try and get myself not to lay on the sofa and just cry.
Well, it's trust me, what you've said there, I mean, this Blighty Talks Bricks is going fantastically well in lots of ways for us. I'd like the industry to get a little bit more behind it, but a lot of the things you've just said, they're going to help a lot of people, because there are people out there that don't have a Lucy.
Yep.
There are people out there that don't actually know, even if they're surrounded by people, don't have the courage. It takes a lot of courage to actually put your hand up and say, "Ooh, I'm struggling."
And it was a real shock to me as well. And I didn't necessarily achieve those three things every day. I've always been a fixer and somebody that's out there, makes things happen, used to people coming to me for help. You know, I was a scout leader for 25 years. You've done all these different things. And for you to suddenly go, not in a good place.
It's alien, isn't it?
Yeah, very, very much so.
Alien.
In terms of where I was going. All I would say is that it's been the best thing I could have done, however scary it was. And like speaking to a counsellor who I never met, it was all over Zoom.
Right.
She was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Because I think she realised that I didn't always want to talk about my emotion. I had to find a way through, navigate
absolutely.
where I was going to, because I think fear steps in then, doesn't it? How am I going to...
And it doesn't affect... Every person has a different way of feeling it. I think the feelings are the same, but the way they deal with it. Some people deal with it by addiction. Some people deal with it by getting angry. Some people deal with it by just getting very, very quiet. There's no set way.
I definitely lost my voice. I almost stopped talking at work because I thought I was going to burst into tears all the time. So I definitely lost my voice. That was a massive thing that happened to me, that I almost stopped talking completely. So couldn't even run a board meeting effectively.
Oh, imagine that 15 years ago.
No. So that's where I lost it. And then I got frightened really of where I was. But yoga definitely helped me because it's not just about the physical practice, it's about the meditation and that trying to order things in your head. It worked for me big time. Everybody will have something, but one of the things they do say when you're struggling mentally is do some form of exercise, whatever it is, and if you can get outside as well, because that fresh air, that movement will actually help big time.
Well, it's very interesting because thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing what you have shared. I know it's not been easy for you. You're obviously doing amazingly well with the grief. My dad was a bit like your dad. He was my best friend.
Yeah.
And there's never a day where I don't think of him. But it does get better, and it does get easier. And you remember all the good things. And you remember the leadership, the love that they gave you. And you know that they would want you to crack on.
And my dad would, definitely.
And so you're doing an amazing job. I just want to touch on something. I mean, this badge here, I think the majority of our listeners are under 40. Prostate cancer hits people, generally speaking, when they get to 50 and over. I think the stats, it's likely that 1 in 8 men will get prostate cancer. I think one man dies every 45 minutes with that illness. It is one of the cancers that can be treated. I'm asking you youngsters, under 50, to badger all of the people that you know are over 50 to have a test. I had my test last month, and fortunately I'm okay. Badger your uncles, your brothers, your dad, your granddad to go and have the test. If you get it, they can treat it, and treating it early is the right way to go. So just something for people out there. Don't just think that just because you're 50 you've got to do it. You youngsters badger the old ones to go and have that test. Sarah, I know, because I've known you many years, I could sit and talk to you all day long. You're just amazing company, you always have been. Your enthusiasm is just electric. You always leave people feeling energised. Let's get you back in the industry. You're the first person I've spoken to that's spoken some sense about what we can do. And I genuinely mean that.
Thank you.
It's been an absolute pleasure to have you, and we will get that game of golf in soon.
Good.
But I'm not playing you for money because I know you'll turn me over. But, Sarah Pascoe, thank you very much.
Thank you, Blighty.
Listeners, viewers, hope you've enjoyed this podcast. I've certainly enjoyed sitting here with Sarah. Stay safe and look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks very much.